All right, today is Monday, June 8th, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. All morning, I've just been listening to my Songs from the Rhine, my 6 hour ramble, over 6 hours of random thoughts towards the end, at least. And I remembered I mentioned Thoughts at a Funeral, which is probably something in my subconscious, so I can talk about this album, leading me to this recording today. Thoughts at a Funeral is an early album. It's going to be a little bit different because they're not really melodies. This is more of a spoken word album. There's a couple of my albums that are spoken word, like Velvet Underground style, Patti Smith style, almost like a rap, more of spoken word. Henry Rollins does it sometimes. And this one is weird. It didn't start out like that. I kind of had to improvise it. Basically, I wanted to include it in my book when I wrote it in 2022, when I was getting my book together. And this idea, this concept, which I spoke of yesterday, is you're sitting at a funeral and every song will represent some daydream that the person is having while they're sitting at the funeral, thinking about random shit, wanting to get the fuck out of there. Yeah, so that's basically what the concept always was, but it wasn't what it became. Like, I'm thinking I wrote this in like 2014-ish, something like that. I guess I could figure that out, but I'm too lazy to do that. But it was pretty early on around that time period. And then 10 years later, when I tried to work out the concept farther, to begin with, there was no lyrics for any of these songs. So I had to come up with lyrics. And as I was doing that, I got the idea to write a few paragraphs for each song describing an animation that's funny but deals with death, but is also kind of comical in a dark kind of way. So that's what I came up with, and I think it works pretty cool. I have a plan in the future to write another art book with animations of each one of these scenes, and that's where I'm going for next. I feel like I can do that. Like, I'm not an animator. I've never dealt with animation, either pen and paper and crayon or digitally through software programs or whatever. However people make animations. I've never been involved in that. Something I could teach myself, but I've never had that urge to do it yet. So most likely I would just create some digital doodles and release a book with these stories and see how it comes out. I'm not sure yet exactly how it's going to come out, how it would be outlined. Is each one going to be like maybe 3 or 4 pages, something like that would probably be better, where the story is kind of short, but I could stretch it out with the use of illustrations, almost like a children's book. So that's where I see it. It could be a pretty uh, what's the word I'm thinking of? It's kind of a complicated thing to produce as a ebook that I like to do. Usually I just make a bunch of doodles and artwork and I'll release books like that, even like cross-dressing at Goodwill was like that. This one will be different because there's a different story for each song, and I also have the lyrics as poetry, so I'm mixing all these different art forms in one book. There's lyrics, there's these animations, and then I would have to develop some kind of an illustration to coincide with that. It sounds like it's definitely been done before. I'm not reinventing anything, but I've never done anything that extensive. where I have to draw animations for a story, almost like I'm animating a story, animating a movie, a picture book. So I just got to get inspired to do it. I plan to do the same thing with Willie the Vegan, make it like a cartoon graphic novel, the best I can do it, because I'm not an illustrator. I allow myself one day every 2 weeks to be on Instagram because it's too addicting. And through the last couple months being on Instagram, there's really talented comic book artists that share their stuff online for free. And that's also something I thought about when it came to Waitress from Mars, or something I want to do Willie the Vegan in the future as a graphic novel. I would probably have to get someone to do it because I don't have confidence in myself learning that skill to that degree. People have been doing it their entire lives. Unless I can find a unique way to do it, like I guess I'm thinking of South Park, how they were able to develop a new type of animation that fit their style and sense of humor. And it looks cool on the screen, but it's not like crazy technical animation as far as I know. It's simpler than other studios would do. And they can produce an episode in a week or 2 weeks, whatever it is. So they were able to evolve animation to fit what they were trying to do. So maybe I can come up with something with my limited skills in terms of animation. Like I can't even draw like a Flyers logo. Uh, I have trouble with geometry and drawing. Like I'm usually drawing these weird doodles that are more just surrealistic or abstract art that recently, because my ADD is like back in full force over the last few weeks. It's kind of down now, but when I was having the ADD, I would just do what I called rapid fire art, where I would just make doodles in 5 minutes. You make a doodle, you don't even think about it. You move on to the next one. You move on to the next one. And I did like 100 of them over a couple days. And then now I'm trying to put them together to make actual art. Whether I put 4 of these together or maybe more, I don't know yet. I kind of did that one other time, maybe last summer or so. One of my 55 doodles, or one of those books that I have on Amazon, where if I have ADD and I don't feel like focusing on making a doodle that would take an hour or 2 hours, I'll just make 20 doodles in an hour, 5 minutes each or less, and then just go from there. It's a different approach. At least I'm still creating something, even if I'm lacking the motivation to really do it in my usual fashion. So that's what I'm talking about. I can evolve something. um, Yesterday was my Songs from the Rhine, and I have the pictures in my head of how the animations would look throughout the story. All the conflicts, Lorelai killing the sailors, and the king having orgies, waking up and stabbing people. And I can see the images in my head. And as I listened to it today, this morning, I was like, I could do that. I could try to make some kind of a visual component to it. So it's a better kind of a pitch if I go to a studio and they see what I'm thinking about in my head. That could get their imagination going. And so I'm going to try to do that, try to learn that skill a little bit better. I can see these cool images in my head of like the main character, Helene, holding the king's head after she chops it off and shit like that. Or the scene where I just said the king, as a child, kills his mother in the Iron Maiden. Like, there's a lot of good potential for horrific type of graphic novel like that. There are graphic novels in that realm, the horror genre of comic books. That's as far as I can go with that because I don't know how to name any of them. Maybe that's why people like anime. There's more of a spiritual element to anime sometimes. I'm completely uneducated in any of this shit. Anime is probably something I would get into. It's just it's not in my past. I have no nostalgia for Pokemon. I don't even know if that's not anime, but I didn't grow up with that, so it's not something I want to check in on and see how people are interpreting it today. But it's weird. Like I guess people right after me were into Dragon Ball Z. Is that anime or just Japanimation, whatever it's called? I just never went down those avenues. The farthest I got was like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, because I think that's based on like an Asian from some country, a different Asian show that was similar to like that, or Voltron. But that was when I was really little. So yeah, it's weird. Animation has always been in my life, but I never really thought I could draw at any point in my life. I still can't really draw. The doodles I do are more like just stream of consciousness. I'll just start making shapes and see what they form into. Like that's all I really can do. If somebody told me to draw a tomato, I'd have no fucking idea how to start. I never took classes like that. Draw a fucking apple and shade that shit, man. You gotta shade it. So, yeah, I don't know how to do that stuff, but maybe I can learn if I really take a couple weeks and practice every day. Because that's what this album would require. If it's not going to be an animation, at least I can't do an animation myself, but I could do a book like I've done before and just have pictures in there the best I can to depict each scene that I'm going to read today. This is going to be different because these don't really have melodies. Yesterday, my 24 songs from the Rhine, I was singing some of the songs that had catchy melodies that I remembered after 20 years. These are all spoken word. There is music, but more like an ambient feel where you have an instrumental and then somebody just speaking over it, like the Laurie Anderson. I got into that later in life. And what else? I already mentioned a couple other ones. Spoken word is cool because I feel confident I could do that. Singing is different. You got to train your body, get real deep down, sing from your butthole. That's how I always term it, and that's not easy to do. So I guess what I'm going to do for this talk, I'll just go through each story, and then I'll read the lyrics. Some of them are very short, some of them are longer, and then I'll try to talk a little bit more about some of the influences, I guess. And yeah, the preface to this chapter in my book, I'm going through it now to see if I want to talk about anything. Really, it's just what I just said, that all of these were just instrumental songs where I didn't feel like writing lyrics, because I never feel like writing lyrics, especially back then, 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So when I would have a long jam session, I would just split up different parts into different sections, and at least I could do that with a cool edit program or something like that, or Audacity, I think that's what it's called. I used to use that later, a free program of audio recording with multi-tracks, and it's not professional, but you can at least get your ideas onto some digital format, which is definitely cool. We're spoiled, man. 50 years ago, people couldn't do this. I talked about that a lot. All the potential for music that exists in the world today, because anyone can do it. If you have the inspiration and the creative juices flowing inside of you, you could set up a makeshift home studio, get some friends, or do it yourself. There was video on Instagram yesterday. I was watching, or the day before, Saturday, of a woman making ambient music on her keyboard or synthesizer and then making the drum beat on the same machine. And it sounded just as good as a radio song, some kind of commercial production. And then she was singing over it, and it was a beautiful melody. Like, that's the cool part of the technology, the digital revolution, the easeability of today as opposed to 50 years ago, where you have to know somebody who has a studio and get studio time and find someone who knows how to produce stuff. I remember reading the Bad Religion book, Do What You Want, and the story about, Epitaph Records and Gurewitz and how he started that. And I think he produced a lot of the albums in the beginning. I think he did Offspring Smash too. That's kind of what set off that storm. And he made just a shit ton of money off of that. The Offspring Smash, that album absolutely took over the suburbs. Like I talked about many times. That was the Dookie and Offspring were just crushing all over the country, probably globally. I don't know how often the Offspring went to Europe back then, but I remember seeing them in like 90, I don't know what year it was. I can't remember, 94 maybe, 95, when they came around to southern New Jersey. So, yeah, it's cool. Like, he was able to get a lot of albums out doing it himself. I think he kind of just taught himself how to do it, if I remember correctly. I don't know. But, or the Dave Rawlings example, he kind of does everything on his own. They even make their own vinyl records. Or you can look at NoFX and how they did it themselves, Fugazi. I guess when I think of DIY, I always go towards the direction of punk rock, because it seems like a lot of bands were able to do it like that. The DIY approach, you don't need a record label, you don't need an agent, you don't need all that bullshit. You just go out and do it. Nirvana Bleach, they did it like in a weekend or whatever it was. Like, I forget how long, but it was something like that. It wasn't like an extensive studio time for months and months trying to perfect each song, like Boston, right? I guess that's the ultimate example of the band Boston, More Than a Feeling. They spent years trying to perfect the sound and production. And sometimes I guess that's cool. I'm not saying it's not cool. Alan Parsons, that approach to production is also a worthy way to approach music. If Dark Side of the Moon was recorded on a 4-track, or A Day in the Life by the Beatles with all those crazy, the orchestration at the end, it's not going to have that same level of professionalism or emotional impact. So I'm not criticizing that either. I'm just saying it's cooler today. If you really want to put out music, you're able to do it in the comfort of your own wherever. I'm making this talk right now in my bathroom because I get better acoustics in here, I think. And it's less distracting. If I sit in the dark and just speak like this, I have better chances of not saying stupid shit. And I'm just talking into my phone's recorder. When I finally get to the West Coast and start my process of building my home studio, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I keep saying that, but I think it's going to finally happen eventually. Hopefully the next couple of weeks. If I keep thinking it in a positive fashion, maybe there's a better chance. But I can't move until I actually get a job, man, because I don't trust people. They want me to travel somewhere just to do an interview. Like, I'm not going to travel 3,000 miles just for an interview. Like, I need to know I can get a job. So, yeah, I need to find the place to do that, whether it's Arizona, Phoenix area, Las Vegas, California, New Mexico, Texas. And that's all I'm waiting for. I think it'll happen in the next couple of weeks. according to my bullshit radar. I think people are finally done fucking with me, and I'll be able to move out to the West Coast and start this process. Would this be one of the albums I do myself? I would say yes. I think I could do this one myself. I can make ambient noise or just using the guitar in an ambient fashion, synthesizer if I can get some other instruments, and I'd be able to produce this myself. It should be sloppy. It should sound kind of amateurish because it's going to be one of the albums that I can do without collaborating with other people. And the majority of these are like that. There's probably 15 to 20 that I would need other people to help me with. But it's going to be an experiment, man. I'm going to be using trash cans as drums or maybe African drums if I need to add percussion. Because, in my opinion, if I want to listen to ambient music, I don't want drums. I don't want anything to keep a pace. I want an ambient texture that I don't know where it's going. I don't know how to keep the beat. I can't count along to it. The droney type of texture of a good ambient album, that's what I want to develop. And you don't need drums for that. But I will need drums for other things, so it's something I think about a lot. But yeah, this album is one I could do myself. The two other ones that I shared, Waitress from Mars and Songs from the Rhine, yeah, I can't do anything too much by myself. I would need other voices. I would need other people to play some of the instrumental parts. An album like this is fairly straightforward, and it's got my weird kind of sense of humor. When I talk about funerals, I usually try to turn it into a stand-up comedy routine. Like, I often wondered, why do people become morticians? When did that become a profession? Like, that's got to be the weirdest job there is. The only way I would do that job is if they paid me like $1 million, I guess. You got to put makeup on dead people. Like, I don't know who gets that job and is happy with it. Like, I don't know how to get used to something like that. It's a fairly new profession, maybe since the 1800s around. I looked this up before. Maybe it started with like Abraham Lincoln or in some form that people started putting makeup on dead people. So everyone could go to the viewing and see how beautiful they look as a dead corpse, as a corpse, as opposed to a living corpse. It's a zombie. So I don't understand that. I think that if I was a mortician, I think that was my stand-up bit, which is kind of stupid, but I'll say it anyway. I would just put clown makeup on everybody, give them a clown nose, and put like really clown, clown fucking makeup. That's what I would do for every corpse. Just to have people laugh while they're like mourning that person. But yeah, I don't get funerals. I think it's mostly a scam just to get more money from people. You spend 10, 20 grand on a coffin just to get, rot away in the ground, and then they take it out in 100 years and use it again for somebody else. It's a good scam. I wish I invented the funeral business because it doesn't make any sense to me logically. I don't know. It's another status symbol. Like, it really is. People are concerned about appearances even after they're dead. It's a weird kind of sickness, man. I don't know if it's a Western thing. The way Western people approach the issue of death. Maybe it is. I don't know what people in Asian countries do. Do they have these fancy funerals? I don't know what people do, man. It's kind of interesting. Another documentary idea I had was to kind of compare and contrast how people in different countries and cultures approach a death. What do they do when there's a funeral? Because the only funeral I know is you go to a church, it's all somber and really morbid. And then you go to a funeral home, look at the dead body, say your final goodbye, and then, my condolences, and then you leave. I've never been to a different kind of experience where people, um, I don't know, where people think differently about life and death, I guess. I never experienced other cultures. I would make that film because to me it's like a personal journey to see how other people approach the issue of how to respect the dead and what to do. Some cultures will sit with the dead body, or there's different. This is connected. I read the Tibetan Book of the Dead as I was putting these lyrics together. Probably because I heard it on a podcast, maybe Duncan Trussell or one of those people I listen to a lot. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead, I can't really understand or talk about it because I only read it one time. Like, there were parts in there that were very interesting, though. There's certain steps that you have to do to make sure the dead body enters a peaceful afterlife and all this stuff. There's all these symbols of colors. And from what I remember, yeah, color was a big thing. And there's a whole step-by-step process that is crazy complicated. I think that was most of the book, just trying to teach people the right way to deal with the dead body, to make sure that the spirit or the soul can go back to the source or whatever it was. And that's about as much as I can talk about. But there is one poem that I wrote dealing with the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it's one of the best ones, I think. I think it's the best one on this album because I did take a lot of time. I put a lot of effort into trying to make it sound somewhat intelligible. Maybe this is the one. I'm trying to look for it now. Yeah. In Circles, which one of the songs I'll get to later. It's probably the only one that I would really proud of the words that I put, because I wrote this while I was reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead and while I was putting some of these other ones together. I don't dislike the other ones. Like, I did put effort into it, but that's the one that came out in the most organic fashion. So I'm pretty proud of that one. But yeah, it just shows the evolution of an album. I had an idea for a series called Evolution of a Song, and I'm still going to do that. I have an idea for the third one. I just haven't done it yet. This is the evolution of an album, really. What I'm describing, these were all instrumentals, and then I'm like, I really want to include this concept in my book. So that's why I forced myself to write more lyrics, more damn words, you goddamn words. And that's how it turned out. And then later, maybe a year later, I went back and I added all these stories because I was like, I need to make this more interesting for the reader and for myself, because it wasn't as good as I thought it should be. Because I really like the music. And again, it's animation. These would all be used by animation with the aid of animation to really make the experience more immersive and just more funny. Because people will look at this and see Thoughts at a Funeral. What is that, a heavy metal album? Some occult symbolism? Is this going to be about Satan and heaven and hell? I don't want to get all deep about that shit. I just want to listen to good music that doesn't make me want to think about death. And I get that. I don't want to think about death either too often. So with the addition of these little cartoons that I created later, I think it gives it a better flavor, that your perception of death, and everyone's perception really, nobody really wants to die. Some people say they don't fear death. When it happens, it happens. It happens to everybody. And sure, but once you're on your deathbed, then your mind's gonna change. You're gonna start going through all this shit, things you wish you did in life, and things you regret, people you wish you had better relationships with. Um, the petty shit is probably the stuff that people think about on their deathbed when they see the light and they're like, oh shit, all right, I'm really dying now. That will change your perspective and all the other bullshit. It's not something you could have without that. You have to be on your deathbed knowing you're going to die, and then it's a freeing sensation. It's probably why they give cancer patients and other terminally ill people, they give them the option to take psychedelics. And some people say that that can lessen the fear of their oncoming death. If a doctor gives you a sentence that you got 6 months to live, buddy, what are you going to do in those 6 months to end your life with a bang? You just going to go fuck a bunch of prostitutes, do some drugs, try to leave behind some kind of legacy. Like, what do you do at that point? I don't know. That's a good conversation to have to somebody who's been through that. But I agree with the Walter White approach. If you get a bad diagnosis, I wouldn't want to die in a hospital either. That's like the most sad shit. You just pump me full of chemicals to try to heal whatever's in balance in my body. It's not very attractive way to go. I probably told that story before, the Bill Burr story that he told in his stand-up special about the guy inherited a helicopter business from his father. The first day on his job, he took one fellow up in his helicopter, and he's doing the tour, and then the guy wanted to kill himself because he had a terminal illness, and he just opened the helicopter door and jumped out, and he landed in water, and he actually survived. I'm not sure about the rest of the story, I forget. But that's kind of that funny. It's not really funny. I'm sure it was traumatic for both of those people. The guy, it's his first day on the job, and the dude just jumps out of the helicopter. Go listen to the Bill Burr bit. It's really funny, even though it's a dark story. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, that guy's like, fuck that. I'm not going to spend 6 months wasting away in a hospital, and I'm just going to end it. Like, I guess that's kind of a poetic way to do it. But that image, it is like a cartoon, and I think there is a YouTube video that somebody made an animation based on that story. And that's what I would compare these stories to. Each one would be different, and of course, I'm not copying off of any of that shit. These are all original stories that I developed. Trying to make, I had maybe 20 ideas, and some of them are really stupid. And these were the 10 best that I could come up with. As short, these would be like 3 to 5 minute animations, if that. They're very short. So I guess let me start with the first one to give you an idea what I'm talking about. But that's what I would share with people. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll share it on my Substack. There is a Bill Burr, I believe I saw it. I could be dreaming this, but I think somebody made an animation of it. Of that helicopter story that I just talked about. And yeah, it's not a funny story when you talk about somebody wanting to kill themselves because they don't want to die in a hospital and go through all that bullshit. And then it's just the irony that makes it funny, though. The guy wanted to die so bad, he jumped out of the helicopter to have a cool death like that. Like, fuck you, I don't care about my disease, I'm going out on my own terms, like that. That's the Walter White, the first episode of Breaking Bad, when he finds out he has, whatever, stage 4 lung cancer or some shit. And his family's like, you got to go get chemo and do all this shit. And he's like, fuck that. And he's still Mr. Rogers in the first season. He didn't become Scarface yet. But even in his mind, he's like, no, man, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out without all that bullshit. And then his family's like, yeah, you got to fight it. You got to do this. I'm sure a lot of people have those conversations. If you find out somebody in your family has a terminal illness, then you have to have that long discussion. Plus the money side of it. That's the other part. So it's a long kind of talk like that. But I'll share that because I think that would give you the general general perspective of how I see this playing out. It could be just a YouTube type of experience. Like I could write this album and speak out all of the spoken word parts and then just have these short animations if I can learn how to do that myself. It's another thing that I would have to, take a month and learn something. If that, hopefully I can learn it in a month or two. Even to produce this album, it's going to take me a while to learn how to do it. Not as long as that, because I've had some experience with multi-track and how to overlap stuff and sound quality, adding some effects. I'm not saying I'm an expert in that because I've never actually released anything, but I've never tried to make an animation, which would be required for a project like this. And if I can't do it, I'll just have to get somebody else to work with me on this. All right, let's get to these stupid stories. I'm sure everyone's so eager. The first one is called Death by Elephant Tusk. That's the first song. The weird thing is, most of these titles were already existing. These were the original titles for each of these songs. But I kind of just made each animation fit the title. Like this story, it starts out with a lonely old truck driver from the United States who has dreamt of taking an African safari his entire life and takes a second job as a bathroom attendant to save enough money for his exotic adventure. Once he has the necessary funds, he buys safari attire at his local African safari corner store, packs his suitcase, then thanks the heavens for finally reaching his lifetime goal. All set, he enjoys his peaceful flight over the ocean to the beauty and wonder of Africa, the cradle of civilization. He can't seem to hold in his excitement when the plane lands, as he skips through the airport and waits for his luggage on the conveyor belt while perusing various safari pamphlets. He grabs his luggage and runs towards the exit, ready for his dream African odyssey to finally begin, only to be fatally stabbed by a charging elephant's tusk as soon as he takes one step outside, quickly ending his long-desired escapade. So that's the flavor I'm going for. This one is kind of reminiscent of that helicopter story. This guy, it's a different perspective. This guy's worked his entire life driving trucks, saves his money as a bathroom attendant, as a second job, trying to get as much money as he can to go to Africa, to go on this crazy safari. The cradle of civilization. Maybe that's on my bucket list too. I've never seen, maybe I went to a zoo as a kid, the Philadelphia Zoo. Maybe I did see lions and tigers and bears, oh my, and elephants are cool. I think elephants are more of the spectacle, or I would rather see a bunch of elephants than, a team of lions. What are they called? It's not a team, whatever they're a pride. Yeah, I think it's a pride. Because I don't want to get too close to any kind of a beast that can run 100 miles an hour and could bite my fucking intestines out pretty easily. So yeah, I just want to go to Africa to maybe live with elephants for a couple days. That would be kind of cool. I saw some kind of PBS documentary. That's probably why that was in my head. That all of humanity probably can trace its ancestry back to Africa, the cradle of civilization. And I don't know what it was. It was something about DNA of human beings throughout the ages. But it could have been anywhere. I just picked Africa because of the title of the song, Death by Elephant Tusk. So I had to kind of arrange this would be like a 4 minute animation, if that, depending on how long the song is. And you can handle it differently. Kimbra, when she did hers, Idols and Vices, it was kind of just a repetition of the animation. It wasn't a long animation. It just kind of just went in a loop. So that was kind of cool. Sturgill Simpson's, I mentioned his before, Sound and Fury. It was different. It was more of a elaborate anime almost, with different types of storylines. All right, this is how. I'm not going to talk about how the music goes because I don't remember. I have recordings and I'm sure I would evolve those later to adjust to what kind of resources I had. But I'll just read these as like I would read on my audiobook. These would just be spoken word dictation. And it's rather short, so it's really pretty easy to get through. It should be, at least. Cosmic mentation of a retraced existence, as above, so below. A gravity grander, charging for visions, in bubbles expanded. To multiply assets of villains without context, for the death of the actor. And that's all. Depending on how this music would go, if this was a 4 minute song, I'd probably spread those out. Most of it would be ambient, or because I just listened to 46 albums of Fela Kuti over the last month or 2 months. He would have a song with limited lyrics, even Zombie, but some of the other ones are better examples, where the music goes for 10 minutes and then you hear his voice chanting something. And then, it becomes a bit of a different experience when you hear his voice come in. And then it goes back to just this trance, taking you to this transcendental place through the Afro beat. So that's another example. Laurie Anderson's a good way to look at it. It's a mostly spoken word of her stuff. I haven't really dug deep into her discography, just the Weird Science album, or Big Science, whatever it's called. I think Big Science. But there's a lot of other examples of spoken word stuff. Wolf Moon is the second song. And this is the story that I developed. A very prim and proper woman sells makeup and skincare products door to door for a living and has risen to become the top salesperson in the company. Although she seems like a normal suburban socialite, every full moon she morphs into a terrifying wolf and devours anyone and anything that happens to cross her path. She runs into a very awkward situation during one sales visit when a defective moisturizing cream turns all the women's faces into cratered surfaces like the moon. In a panic, she packs up her bag and darts out of the house before the enraged, deformed women enact their revenge. When she transforms into a wolf on the next full moon, a ferocious wolf pack attacks her, ripping her flesh to shreds. The next morning, their human identities are revealed as the wolves morph into the moon-cratered women who continue to feast on her carcass. So that's the short little thing I came up with. It would be a cool animation. This woman sells skincare products, and she's really a she-wolf, whatever you want to call it. And then all of the women who use her cream have these weird reactions because they're also she-wolves. And then at the end, they just devour her body in revenge. So that's the flavor of a lot of these animations. It would be ridiculous stuff like that. Getting to the lyrics, the appearance unveiled, instinctual revolts, nature's bond of blood, to traverse the astral plane, waking like a skeleton, violet disappearing, time inside cyclical, kinks of wearing thin, vows of cemeteries, formulaic fear, emotional discoveries, like a ringing in the ear. That's like a fucking limerick. It's got a weird kind of rhyming pattern. So yeah, you can see that. I hear the Laurie Anderson, like her type of a spoken word where she gets very mellow and relaxed. I like that. She's the opposite of maybe the Wanda Coleman voice. Wanda Coleman, from the limited time that I saw her doing poetry readings on YouTube videos, I couldn't find that much. But she's very demonstrative. Is that the right word? She's very loud, and she has weird inflections of her voice to really carry the poem. Laurie Anderson just blends into the ambient music and kind of makes the experience even more peaceful. I think she's really good at that. She's got a new album I gotta check out, but I always say that, so maybe one day I'll get to it. All right, let's move along to song number 3. It's called Black Hole Chariots. And yeah, these are all the original titles before I wrote these stories, so it's kind of weird coincidence, or it's weird how I connected the story to the titles, but I never thought I'd be writing stories when I wrote the titles. I don't know. It's weird to me that it turned out like that. All right, let's get to the story. 2 children lead a chariot of unicorns through the solar system, racing by meteor storms, alien spacecraft, monstrous space creatures, and eventually inside a supermassive black hole. As they zoom deeper within, streaks of colorful light consume their bodies, and their skin transforms into a kaleidoscope of bright tones, like tie-dyed shirts. They emerge from the black hole and return to Earth, where they ride their chariot through every country, infecting everyone they meet with their colorful skin, until every single human appears like a majestically chaotic, vibrant, abstract painting. People of every nation and tribe unite in their colorful, beautiful madness, and world peace is finally achieved as celebrations commence in the streets. So that's almost like a children's tale. I can make a children's book just on this story if I wanted to expand on it. These 2 young children are driving a chariot of unicorns through space, and they go inside a black hole. And when they go in there, when they come out of the black hole, they're painted in this tie-dye, crazy, colorful paint that becomes their skin now. And then they go back to Earth, and every race is infected by this colorful madness. So there's no more race relations. If everyone had the same crazy skin painting, you would not care about that person's race or judge that person based on your ignorance or stereotypes. That would be all done for the most part. Like, maybe it could develop something new. There'll be some other way that humanity is divided up, even if people all look the same. But that's another angle. I'm just trying to make a cute little kid's story, so I don't have to think about all the crazy devil's advocate type of point of view. These are the lyrics that I came up with. Again, they're really just verses. There's no melody, so there's no choruses, there's no bridges. I don't think any of these songs have any of that stuff. The Joker's justice, celestial bodies caged, steadfast stalkers, like universal deviations, guardians illumined, chariots repurposed, dramatize reunions until a piece for every shade, political prescriptions or free will's vibration, broke into bloom to escape from salvation. All right, moving on, genetic engineering. A man is left stranded on a raft in the ocean after his sailing vessel sinks in a storm. Now near death, he considers shooting himself with a flare gun to end his hunger pains. About to pull the trigger, two dolphins soar from the waves, knock the gun away, and save his life as he passes out in shock. They carry him underwater to a sophisticated laboratory where they inject dolphin DNA into his body. He wakes a few days later, now half man, half dolphin, while the dolphin scientists pop open the champagne and celebrate their first successful human-dolphin hybrid. The dolphins then force their new creation to breed with many female dolphins, and the ocean is soon overpopulated with this new human-dolphin creature. Harpooners across the world begin catching this new species, and it becomes the trendy delicacy at fancy restaurants everywhere, as millions of people become cannibals without ever realizing it. So there's a bit of weird cannibalism irony there. That's always good in some kind of cartoon work of art. Let's get to the lyrics. I think this one's kind of so ridiculous of a story that I don't really need to talk about it. But what if that... yeah, I'm just not going to talk about it. If I was going to say, I guess I am going to talk about it. If people were able to breed themselves with another creature, and somehow over the centuries this creature is eaten by other people, so you become a cannibal without ever fucking realizing it, man. That's kind of what I'm going for. Memories like smoke, savage and savior, sinister pillaging, innards to entertain, remedies like guilt, traditional coding, the drumming condition to splinter creation. Hunger like fumes dismembers the flavor, flock of diversions strands the ancient waste. I don't even know how to recite these. I'm just trying to read these the best I can with the most clarity and some kind of emotion behind it. Because if I was doing my audiobook for real, this would take me a long time to kind of go through everything. I'm more confident now, though, because I want it to be as natural as possible. This is my voice. I think it is, at least. Is it my voice? Is this my face? Who knows anymore? Alright, the next song is called The Main Problem with Collateral Damage. Alien ants visit an underground ant colony and share their advanced technology with the earthling ants. With this new information, the worker ants spend countless days and nights constructing an extravagant ant capital city with skyscrapers, electric self-driving vehicles on eco-friendly highways, and protective walls to better protect against earthquakes. With construction completed, the wise leader of the ants holds an epic celebration for the new ant utopia, as all books are burnt after being transferred to the cloud and other digital sources. A funeral is held at the same time above ground, and the ant utopia is crushed when the casket is lowered into the ground, along with all previous knowledge in history of the ant society, as the few surviving ants watch the destruction in total despair. So another type of ironic type of thing, I guess. I came to this story because of that Joe Rogan experience. He used to have those long talks with Graham Hancock, other people that kind of go down the ancient civilization route and past mass destruction events, whatever they're called, past instances of the apocalypse. You know, the biblical flood, maybe it's not exactly like it's understood by the Noah story. But if all these cultures are talking about floods and all this shit, there's got to be some relevance to that stuff. So yeah, I like those type of discussions. I learned about some of that stuff from the Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson. There's a bunch of that on the Joe Rogan podcast, and they have some really captivating talks. Some of it goes over my head. Some of it sounds crazy, but even the crazy stuff is interesting. So, and a lot of times I talk about that. A lot of information is in the cloud. The dependence on technology. If something really went to shit, World War III breaks out, all that crazy worst case scenario stuff that every generation is like, oh, it's not going to happen to us. Pass it to the next generation. It might happen to them. But so at that point, yeah, everything would be lost. I wrote my screenplay, Rinse and Repeat Part 1, about this. Our ancestors, thousands of years from now, humanity still survives. It still goes on. But, they lost our language. They lost all conception of religion. We're going to devolve. We're not going to blend with machines or any of that shit. The future of humanity could be back to our caveman days. No language, no education. We're living off the land in tribes like that. That could be the future if shit goes really crazy. So that was my screenplay related to this type of concept. And think about that shit. Like, people thousands of years from now, they don't know what New York City was. They don't know what Istanbul, Paris, Rome. They don't know what these things are. They just find these old buildings and shit. And they're not going to understand any of it. They're like, what is this thing? What is this statue? The Statue of Liberty. They're like, what the fuck is this thing? Is this what people look like? Was this like their president? Without any knowledge of history, like an alien comes to Earth and doesn't have a tour guide, they're just going to have to make assumptions about stuff. They go to a Catholic church or some other creepy Gothic architecture with gargoyles and shit. They're going to be like, what the hell is this? So that's kind of what I'm going for with a story like this. Again, these are supposed to be funny, man. Hopefully they're funny. Laugh, damn it. Why aren't you laughing? Why aren't you laughing at my stuff? It's funny, damn it. These are the random thoughts that somebody would have as they're sitting at a funeral. So this album, in terms of the animation, it's just, that's all these things are. It could be one character, or each one could be a different character. Their thought bubble. They're sitting at a wake or a funeral, and then you see a thought bubble appear, and then you see these animations taking place within their head. Cults of anxiety, copper wire for collateral. When the mission sets, paranoia's legacy. Just collateral damage. Just collateral damage. South for the winter. Conception, more analytical. Where the movie ends. Statistical recoveries. Just collateral damage. Just collateral damage. And yeah, I remember how this one goes, actually. There is a melody to the outro, which is, this is kind of a heavy metal song at the end, but I'm not going to sing any of it. All right, maybe I will. Should I? Yeah, all right. Sleeping with the lights on, sleeping with the lights on. That's kind of the ending, as the other voice is saying, just collateral damage, just collateral damage. You would have kind of a heavy metal choir going, sleeping with the lights on, sleeping with the lights on. I don't know where I got that from. I think it was a different song that I liked that one little melody, so I added it to that. The next song is called In Circles. And this is the story I came up with. This one's kind of funny. This one might be my favorite one. The corpses of conjoined twins rest in an open casket during their funeral service, while mourners pay their final respects. Their equally conjoined spirits soon float away to meet God, where they find themselves in quite the conundrum, as one is marked for hell and the other for heaven. God then gives them the option to split themselves and part ways, never to see each other again. Having spent their entire existence as one, they decide to stay together, and God is forced to confer with his team of lawyers to see what afterlife would suffice this unique situation. After a great deal of deliberation, numerous pie charts, and analytical research, God decides to string up the twins on a spinning pole like a rotisserie chicken, right on the border of heaven and hell, so they move back and forth between afterlives for eternity. So I thought that was a cool way to portray that. If conjoined twins, is that the politically correct way to say it? Is Siamese twins a bad way to say it? I don't know. But whatever they're called, conjoined twins, they share a body with two heads. And one of them's going to go to hell, the other one's going to go to heaven. What does God do at that point? You know, it's a funny cartoon. I'm not trying to get all spiritual or criticize religion. This is just a funny bit of a loophole that I thought would be funny. What do you do in that type of situation? As God said he would split them up, but they're like, nah, man, we're together, you know, we're going through this together. So he puts them on a rotisserie chicken thing. So they go back and forth from heaven and hell for the rest of eternity. Yeah, that's kind of where, all right, and this one is the In Circles. This is the one that I wrote after reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So I don't know where my brain was at this point that led me to this story. I don't know, something I must have read, clicked something inside of me like that. I'm going to read this spoken word now and see how it is. It's been a while since I went through this. It's longer than the other ones. Hell permeates shelled sanctity, illness spelled return to waste, kneeling to ignore the fates, die each morning, evaporate in rainbows, final spells of whispered weight, dreams discharged, emptied domes, lotus lord of the trip, destined blade, skulls brimmed with blood, hallucinated the hallucinations, bones dry, thoughts uncorked, traced fire to free the course, post-traumatic states of grace, colored in moods for a caved-in subconscious, love the light as your brain scatters with human hide canopies, dimmed blue, drift towards the gray, brutish narcissism, knowledge of the knowledge, redemption, deciphered self-love, comprehending the darker trust of clear light liberation, the awe-inspired breath's demise, ego dies disillusioned until fates pursue with a humbled hue through 7 years of solitude, polished spells of weaker coups, predestination shadowed with swells of tampered youth. And I believe most of this came from my uneducated interpretation of some of the stuff I was reading in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's a book I'll have to return to later at some point because I can't even think of one thing to talk about it. Religious books are not easy to get through, man, without somebody telling you some of the key concepts, whether a person or using some kind of YouTube, like that breakfast, religion for breakfast, like a show, a YouTube channel like that I talked about before, or some kind of podcast that you could get into. It's similar to when I wanted to learn the karate, the Korean type of karate. I can't remember it now. It was in the winter time. Tang Soo Do. And I was all into it for a couple weeks, and I was listening to podcasts, trying to really get into the art of it, but it was something I didn't stay with. I gave up on it for a number of different reasons, but it's similar to that. When you read a religious text, even the Bible, I grew up with the Bible. I went to Catholic school, but a lot of the biblical stories I don't understand. I will need someone to interpret it for me. Religious text they're not easy reads. You have to underline stuff, go through chapters very slowly. Even people who maybe go to school as a philosophy major or go to the seminary to become a priest, a rabbi, I'm sure it's crazy technical in any religion, whatever Muslims do, a Buddhist monk, I'm sure they're constantly going back to their source material to remind themselves about stuff. It's reading a book like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There is not a lot of stuff that stays with me. The retention does not come from one reading, but that's what I came up with as a short little poem. And there are some things about color, because that's the one thing I do remember. And maybe it's good I'm doing this because I'm getting curious about it again. I did watch that movie as a kid, 7 Years in Tibet or whatever, with Brad Pitt. I think that's what it was called. 7 Years in Tibet. I think that's what it was called. So maybe I've always kind of had an interest in it. Yeah, 7 Years in Tibet from 1997. It didn't get great reviews. Well, I was a kid when I watched it, so I can't remember it. 1997 biographical war drama directed by Jean-Jacques Annaud, starring Brad Pitt as an Austrian mountaineer Heinrich Harrer in 1940s and 1951. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I have to watch it again. I don't really remember anything about it. But what I wanted to look up was that Tibetan Book of the Dead. I wish I could speak more intelligently about this stuff because it is interesting to me to see a different perspective on life and death. I think I need that in my life just to get different perspectives. It's not so much to understand stuff so I feel more connected to other people. That's all good too, but I'm kind of selfish about it. I want to find out the truth of the universe before I die, even though I know you're not able to. Importance of colors. I'm searching something to see if there's any relevance to what I remember about the book. So Google, do your thing. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Thodol, sorry if I said that wrong, colors symbolize the 5 elements, state of consciousness. And I can't say these words, sorry. Encountered as brilliant, blinding light, these colors offer opportunities for spiritual liberation. Recognizing them as pure mind projections prevents rebirth into the cycle of suffering. The primary colors and their associated meanings include white light, which is associated with water. White light is purity, mirror-like wisdom, the realm of Buddha Vairocana. The white light is also the central realm. If the deceased is frightened by the intense purity and clings to the dull white light, it risks leading them into rebirth. So, yeah, this is kind of sparking things that I remember a little bit. Blue light is associated with space and ether, symbolized as the wisdom of reality, emptiness, and the Buddha. I don't even want to say these words because I feel bad mispronouncing them. Akshobhya. And the blue light is a brilliant, sharp, dazzling blue light that appears alongside the peaceful deities. The red light is fire, yellow light is earth, green light is wind and air. The fundamental teaching regarding these colors is that they are all natural, spontaneous displays of one's own enlightened mind. During the 49-day bardo, the deceased will be attracted to the dim, dull colors representing the lower realms of existence because they feel familiar. However, if they confront their fear and trust the brilliant, blinding, glorious colors of supreme wisdom, they can achieve enlightenment and escape the cycle of reincarnation. Yeah, it's very difficult to wrap my head around these concepts. I thought reincarnation was like a good thing. You escape the cycle of reincarnation, so you're not going to be imprisoned by another body, whether it's a human body or an animal, a bird, whatever. They're all caged by flesh and blood, as a mammal at least, right? I don't know how to speak more than what I'm trying to get out now. I always thought reincarnation was like the imperative. There is no getting out of that. You're going to get judged, just like the Western religions say heaven and hell. I always thought reincarnation was the same type of a thing where you instruct people with this teaching in the hope that they live a good life, that your life is going to suck in this type of reality, but if you live a good life and follow our orders and never rebel against us, then your next life, let me tell you, you're going to be rich and have all these beautiful women around you, or whatever your sexual preference is, and you're going to have everything your desires could ever want. You never want anything in your next life. That's kind of similar to heaven and hell. But also, some people believe in more of a spiritual awakening when you die, that we're really asleep in this world. We're really dead in our bodies because it's a cage. It's a way to cage whatever natural essence we really are. Whenever I say essence, it makes me think of like dirty sexual stuff, so I don't like that word. But to get back to the source of everything, you can't understand that concept in a body because we're finite. We're born, we live, we die, and that's all we can understand. I talked about that before because I had a long talk with myself about that a couple nights ago. But maybe, yeah, it's almost like you're asleep when you're alive in your body. Once you're dead, that's when you can awake from all this bullshit and live your most free existence where you don't want or need anything. Whatever that is, you can't understand until you die. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is it's almost like a manual, very detailed instructions of how to deal with a corpse. And yeah, that's as far as I can go because I forget almost all of it. But I don't understand reincarnation. That was interesting. And this is coming from Google. Everything I just read is just from whatever I put into Google. It's coming from Quora. So I don't know how factual what I'm talking about is, but I do remember these lights: the green light, yellow light, red light, blue light, the white light, and it's all involved in the experience of a ritual death. How to have that ritual to make sure, I guess according to this, to make sure the person doesn't have to live again, because it's a trap. I gotta refresh my memory for all this stuff, because maybe that's like a very simple part of Buddhism, and I sound so stupid right now. Is reincarnation a good thing? I don't know how to answer that because I never went. Is reincarnation a positive thing for Buddhists? Or is Tibet all Buddhist? Is reincarnation a positive thing? Positive thing for Buddhists. I'll just search it like that. and see what comes up. All right, is reincarnation a good thing in Buddhism? In Buddhism, reincarnation, often called rebirth, is generally not viewed as a good thing. Instead of a permanent soul moving to a new body, it is the continuous cycle of living, dying, and being reborn into suffering. I have heard of that term, samsara. I think I did buy a book with that title. Samsara is like the cycle, or whatever it is, and being reborn into suffering, driven by attachment, ignorance, and karma. The ultimate goal is to break free from this cycle and reach nirvana. So yeah, I guess escaping through this ritual, whatever it is, the cycle of rebirth, which is the samsara, if I'm saying that correctly. So I didn't even remember that part of it. That's probably the most basic concept in Buddhism. You want to reach enlightenment so you don't come back. You don't have to be limited by your physical chains, your physical bounds that your body will always give you. Your desires for survival, and more than that, that's not a thing if you're able to reach whatever that nirvana is, because I can't conceptualize it. It's like string theory. It sounds good. Oh yeah, every decision I make has a different parallel timeline or whatever it is. See, I have trouble even defining it. When it comes to weird concepts like nirvana, enlightenment, it's the same thing for me. I don't know any Buddhist, really. I tried to, maybe in college, I wanted to learn about it, so I went to a Buddhist temple in Baltimore, Maryland, and interviewed maybe one or two of the monks, I think. But yeah, I don't have any knowledge of any of this stuff. It's hard for me to even conceptualize it. What is nirvana? Is it so you escape the cycle of rebirth? So even Buddhism, they do believe in reincarnation, but it's not a good thing. It shouldn't be something that motivates you to live a good life, because you're supposed to get out of that cycle. And that's, I guess, as far as I can go to try to explain it to myself. Beings can be reborn into the 6 realms of existence, which include heavenly realms, the human realm, animal realm, hungry ghost realm, that's a cool word, and hell realms. So those are the 6 realms of existence. The hungry ghost realm. That sounds crazy. What is that? I'm going to stop here. I'm going to talk for too long about this. If I knew more about it, I would feel okay, but I'm going to say something stupid, which I probably already did. So I'd rather just stop here. But I am interested in that stuff. That's why I did read the book, and I highlighted passages and spent maybe 3 or 4 days writing that poem that I just went through, because I wanted to sound somewhat intelligible, like I knew what I was talking about. But let me move on. That's the most heady one. That I felt like I knew I was going to spend a lot of time talking about that poem. The next one is called Serenity. A male seeing eye dog strolls into a dog park with his other four-legged friends. He soon encounters a new female seeing eye dog, and they instantly fall in love as the 2 lovebird dogs kiss and caress each other. Unaware of this love connection, their blind human companions begin to walk off in opposite directions, but the 2 dogs drag them until they are back together. In a joyful turn of events, the blind man and woman also fall in love, as they are greatly moved by the doggy romance. They spontaneously decide to live together within a cozy apartment and enjoy their newly found love over the next few weeks, as it appears to be a truly destined coupling. One day, while the dogs guide them through a rail yard, they get distracted by their love for each other and fail to see an oncoming train, as their human companions get flattened into pancakes. The train then derails and explodes, causing an absolutely tragic scene. That night, the two dogs cuddle together in their apartment and share a bottle of wine by romantic candlelight, while a news report plays on the TV regarding the horrific train accident. So, yeah, I don't know where this one came from, but it would be a cool little cartoon, 4 to 5 minute little animation showing this. You think it's going to be a happy ending, and maybe the dogs planned this from the beginning. All right, let me get through the lyrics for this one. Liberated spirits, or forever clash of souls, derail the invitation, stress-induced creation. Fever of the high tide, to flee the transmutation. Love upon the shadow, the serenity in flames. Lazy sense of function, destined to defame. Televised regression, the perpetual revenge. Maybe I still had a bit of the Tibetan Book of the Dead within my head at this point, because it's reminding me of some of those concepts. Love upon the shadow, the serenity in flames, lazy sense of function destined to defame. Yeah, who knows? The perpetual revenge. Maybe that's almost like your spirit. If you're never going to find nirvana, and I guess most people don't. So according to Buddhists, I must have had so many different past lives because I'm still in a body. Whatever spirit is inside of me must have been through some shit. If I've been reincarnated, and this is really the present moment that I find myself speaking right now, I'm really living in the present. Isn't that kind of crazy to think about? Like, what are the odds that I'd be alive right now in the present moment? It's kind of a weird thought if you think about it. I think I wrote a lyric, I think exactly with that sentiment in another song. What are the chances that everyone's alive together in the present moment? What's our conception of time? All these weird thoughts. I don't feel like going down the philosophy of time again. Everything in a circle and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't get me a clearer vision of how to live my life, so I can't think about it that much. Oh yeah, my life is a circle. It doesn't mean anything. The past, present, and future, I can experience those things at the same time, simultaneously. I don't know how to conceptualize a statement like that. It's too complicated, man. So I usually like it, and I think about it for a couple of minutes, and then I go to something else. Maybe that's ADD. Maybe that's because I'm aware it's too complicated, and I'm not smart enough to talk about it for a half an hour to go through the philosophy of it. All right, let's move on. Everything in Orange is the next song. A family holds a funeral for their pumpkin on Halloween after it was demolished by a group of vandals. As the children cry for their smashed pumpkin friend, the father, not as emotionally attached, sips on his flask of whiskey and imagines the bits of pumpkin merging into a monstrous pumpkin creature who destroys their home and rampages around the entire neighborhood. The pumpkin monster then frees all the other pumpkins enslaved on people's porches as they immediately get revenge on their former suburban captors by carving triangles on their eyes and wacky grins on their mouths. The next morning, the father sobers up and drives to a coffee shop where he orders a pumpkin latte. He sits down, opens his laptop, and begins writing his screenplay titled Revenge of the Smashed Pumpkins, based on his drunken visions from the night prior. A few months later, his screenplay is purchased by a major Hollywood studio, and the movie eventually wins Best Picture of the Year. As he joins the cast and crew on stage to accept the award, we zoom into space and view Earth, just as the entire planet is whacked to bits by a group of young space hooligans dressed up as pumpkins on Space Halloween. Yeah, that one's probably coming from punk rock stuff, actually. I know it's Smashing Pumpkins. Um, for some reason, I want to say this came after listening to the Vandals, maybe some songs by the Vandals, and I was thinking weird thoughts at that point. I don't remember. I don't know why that's popping in my head. The punk band, the Vandals, which I don't know that well, actually, but I do listen to from time to time. All right, let me go through the lyrics. Birth inevitable, masters and pawns, sheltered wars of gods without names, the primal chaos of a dying anarchist, unity veiled with a blame irrational, orange cocoons communing with criminals, the vandals debate, pray to the candlelight. Yeah, that's probably why I had that line in there. I don't know what it's really reminding me of. I know the Vandals have a pretty cool, twisted sense of humor at times. Maybe something I listened to led me to write this, but I don't know. That's something I have no memory of, really. But it's a pretty stupid story. Like it might look cool as an animation, though. If you could create something like this to go along with the music, which is my goal, I don't think it works without that. Because now this is what this album is. When I look at these songs and the lyrics, I picture these short little scenes, so it has to go together at this point. All right. The next song is called Re-Entry. It's kind of a science fiction type of a plot line. In a future human society, funerals now involve launching dead bodies into space on a trajectory towards the sun. One man's corpse zooms towards the giant ball of fire, surrounded by thousands of others on the same course. Before he is incinerated to ash, a comet zips by and blasts him towards a planet in the farthest reaches of the universe. His body lands in a peaceful lake full of healing water that restores him to his youth. With a new lease on life, he spends the next 20 years building a spaceship on this exotic planet with the aid of some friendly alien mechanics. Once the vessel is ready, he collects some of the healing water and travels back towards Earth to share the gift of eternal life with humanity. As he gets closer to Earth's orbit, thousands of dead bodies block his path in a massive logjam on their way to be cremated by the sun. He loses control of his spaceship and drifts aimlessly towards the blistering star, along with the deceased masses. His ship then burns up, and the healing water evaporates, bringing all the corpses nearby back to life, just seconds before they are set ablaze and die all over again. The end. That was my favorite part of the story. I think I wrote this story just to have that ending. If there was some magical healing water that could bring a dead body back to life, and then these people that are, first of all, that's a pretty good idea. You don't want to have dead bodies in the ground anymore. Maybe it's good fertilizer. I guess so. Dust to dust, we become back to the earth. See, that's another reason these funerals are a scam, dude. Because you're supposed to give yourself back to the earth. Isn't that some kind of belief for some cultures? You get buried in the ground so that worms can eat your flesh and return you back to fertilizer or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Carbon material. What if you put all the dead bodies on the moon buried in the ground, bring a bunch of worms and try to create life on another planet like that? Yeah, I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of that. I'm sure there is plans to do stuff like that. How do you create life and sustain it, though? Like, that's the problem, I guess. The atmosphere has to be able to, or these, whatever organisms could survive would be, different than Earth because the atmosphere is so crazy on different planets. But I wrote this story just so I could have an ending like that. That these bodies come back to life and then they get incinerated by the sun. Like, oh my God, I'm back. I'm alive. I'm alive. And then a second later, they're fucking incinerated by the sun. I just thought that would be a cool little ending to that. Slaughtered reason for a spiritual speculation, melt with the healing, glowing chains disintegrated, swarms of static of the madman's edifice, carbon steadied by wrought reverberation, scripted organs when the numbers scurry, asleep through the bell, now a second tilling. All right, one more to go. This one's long. Yeah, I'll take a little breather before I get into this. Social Darwinism is the last one. This would be a longer animation, maybe almost like a 10-minute song to fully highlight this concept and end it with a really powerful type of a lasting statement. Like I'm really making some grand statement through these stupid stories. But this one's kind of more complicated. Hopefully it reads kind of simply. It's been a while. A family of 10 clumsy vampires resides in a quiet suburban community where they survive the best they can by trying to keep to themselves. After a tree branch snaps and fatally impales 2 of them through the heart, they cut down all the trees in the neighborhood to ensure a safer vampire environment. With no more trees, the once green area turns into a desert, and they are forced to move, while the blazing sun sets fires to all the homes. The vampire family, now down to 8, moves into a zombie neighborhood, where they are attacked day and night by zombies hungry for brains. After 2 more of the vampires are killed, the family constructs a large wooden fence around their home, then set it ablaze to keep the zombies away. Not exactly expert engineers, the fire instantly spreads to their home, and the rest of the neighborhood is soon also up in flames. The vampire family, now down to 6, moves into a community of friendly ghosts who greet them with open arms during a welcome to the neighborhood block party. During the festivities, one of the child vampires finds a magic book and inadvertently casts an ancient spell opening up the gates of hell, sending all the ghosts to eternal damnation, while also setting the entire neighborhood on fire as 2 more vampires burn to death. The vampire family, now down to 4, is once again forced to find a new home as they drive their minivan through a heavy thunderstorm, only to be swept away in a flash flood. They seek refuge in a cave in the surrounding wilderness and begin their new life off the grid. As they sleep peacefully one night by the fire, a blundering coyote digs for scraps of food in their camp and sets himself on fire in the process. In a panic, the flaming coyote jumps onto one of the vampires, who jumps onto another, and all 3 tragically burn to death. The vampire family, am I doing the math correctly? Oh no, yeah, that's correct, sorry. The vampire family, now down to just 2, flees from their cave dwelling and finds what looks like an abandoned cabin deep in the woods. Once inside, they start a fire and sleep in comfort, believing luck is finally back on their side. Later that night, they awake and realize the cabin is actually a church, as a few priests hold out their crucifixes and chant an ancient prayer towards them. One of the vampires is flung back into the fireplace and burns to death, while the other jumps through the window, barely escaping with his life. The last vampire, appearing even more lifeless and pale than usual, finds a gas station, buys a cigar, and peels off the "It's a Boy" wrapping. He then douses himself with gasoline from the pump, places the cigar in his mouth, grabs a matchbook, and ponders whether or not to light up. We drift away higher and higher into the stars under the peaceful moonlight, never to learn of his decision. So it's a genocide of a family of 10 clumsy vampires. And this guy's like, oh man, all my other family members died. What do I do at this point? And we don't learn his final decision. Does he burn himself to death? Because I have so many endings to movies I feel like that has that similar thing. Well, Once in a Lifetime, where at the end of the story, which is like a fever dream story, if you didn't listen to that, go check that one out. My screenplay, Once in a Lifetime. At the end of it, Todd douses himself in gasoline and sets himself on fire as an ending. Kind of a dark comedic way to end it. And this was a similar thing, but I didn't want to leave it because I already used that. I didn't want to use it again. But that's a cool way to end anything. End a movie just with the lead character setting themselves on fire. That's pretty badass. Whatever they call that, self-immolation, maybe that's a term when monks were doing it. And this is a very simple poem. I tried to make it as simple as possible to end this on a kind of a positive note. Belief in love, belief in the heart, hymns unblocked, eternal divides, thoughts recede, death upbeat, fables behind, the mind complete. Silence the throne and voices beneath, relabel the code, nature restricted. Death without passage, life without fury, belief in love, belief in the heart. That's about as corny as I can get, I think. Belief in love, man. Peace and love, man. Peace and love. Yeah, you can get cynical about it's still good to have that message, even if it's cynical, and people approach it with cynicism. Eventually, it might get to enough people if you keep spreading peace and love in your daily travails. It's not hard. It's not easy to do, but it's not hard to do. You just have to train yourself to be that person that wants to put out the good vibes everywhere they go. Yeah, that's not me right now. I tried to be that, but at this point, I'm more just cynical. There's a cynical version of myself, and it's battling against the peace and love version, whether it's because really that's what I said before. That's the truth. It's not easy or hard to be either of those things. It's just how you train your mind to deal with other people. Are you going to be cynical and untrusting of people based on other people's actions? It's hard not to be if that's what your reality is. Or are you going to be the peace and love guy or girl trying to spread those good vibes? This is a more complicated conversation than you can only be one of those two things. Like, life isn't like that. People aren't like that. Maybe people who find that enlightenment are like that, where they don't even have to decide between those two things. They just exist. There's no battle for good and evil. When all you do is exist, you're not trying to steal shit from other people because you don't have desire for material possessions. You're not trying to get fat because you're not going to get addicted to food. You're not going to become lustful because you don't have that desire inside of you. These are all human capabilities. If you practice it and train yourself, you can get there, but it's not easy. Like, there's different levels to it. Some people have the desire to kill people. Some people have the desire just to have crazy sex. Some people have the desire to eat their feelings. Whenever they get depressed, they just pig out, binge eat. I've been there before. I was too afraid to go to a job interview like in my 20s, so I just parked at a Taco Bell and like scarfed down like 5 burritos. I remember it clearly. It was like the only time I had like a binge eating session where I just sat in my car and ate burrito after burrito like a fucking pig. It's a vivid memory because I never did that again. It was just a one time weird event in my life. I was nervous to go to some job interview. I don't know why. What I was trying to do, what the job was, I don't remember. So, from a Buddhist perspective, you don't have any conflicts anymore. You train your thought process, your emotions to be non-existent. I'm stealing this from someone on Instagram that talked about the Matrix, the scene in the Matrix where Neo bends the spoon because there is no spoon. That whole thing, because nothing's real in the material, physical world. Everything is a mirage in a way. There is no spoon. It's just a computer code. It's just your mind telling you there's a spoon. Your mind's telling you that you have an identity, an individual consciousness. Your mind is telling you that this is your enemy because this is what my government is telling me, that I have enemies in some other foreign country. Or your religion is telling you that. Your mind can tell you anything. The only thing you can do is have some critical thinking, at least to analyze whatever your mind is telling you, or some outside information seeping into your consciousness. But according to the Matrix type of philosophy, nothing is real. So you shouldn't have any fear of anything. If it's not real, there's really nothing to fear at that point. The physical manifestation of reality, whether it's a computer code or some other devilish trick that the devil is playing on everyone. We're really in hell right now, but this is the devil's trick that he put on everyone. We're really existing in hell, but we think we're on a planet in space, but this is really hell right now. Like, I'm not saying that's what I believe. I'm just saying that's another valid, it's just as valid of an explanation as a computer simulation. Or everything you've been taught is true to some degree. Whatever you've been taught, depending on your geographic upbringing and your religious upbringing. So, yeah, I like that type of a conversation. I'm not intelligent enough to go much deeper than what I just said, but the mind is powerful. You can train yourself to not even think about that duality of good versus evil. Things exist just because they exist. There doesn't have to be a driving force. There doesn't have to be a manifest destiny to conquer and spread your philosophy, your worldview, your culture. All of that stuff is secondary to just existing. And what does that mean to exist? Just to exist, you're alive. That's all you really need to understand. The search for truth beyond that will lead you to many different areas of information, some of it valuable, some of it not valuable. And I guess you just learn to take what works for you. When I was studying other types of religions, like I would do certain practices, like not eat, like the Ramadan thing. I would not eat until the sun went down for a month. Or the Mormon thing, I spoke about this before. No caffeine in my diet, no drugs, keep your body like a temple, which is a good thing for anyone. You don't have to be a Mormon. That should be a universal principle. No alcohol, no drugs, because I want to say they're all kind of a poison, but I also agree with, I was watching a Pawn Stars episode maybe last Sunday, and the main guy, Rick Harrison, It's talking about beer. Somebody brought in some old beer barrels from the Prohibition era. So he goes to a brewery and he's talking about how beer is the nectar of the gods. Beer is proof that God loves us because in a lot of those, even 200 years ago, in certain places without clean water, people had to drink beer. It was healthier. You want to get infections or parasites and shit. So I'm kind of weird about that. I do consider myself straight edge to the point where I would get a tattoo eventually on the back of my neck, the straight edge X, because I like that philosophy. But I'm sure even within the straight X community, straight X, the straight edge community, that people have different interpretations of it, just like any other mode of groupthink. I like it just because it promotes a positive message in my mind. I wouldn't have gotten this far in life if I turned to drugs and alcohol or other shit. So I'm all about the clean living and all that shit, even in terms of food, and you can also incorporate your daily thoughts into that part of a healthy diet. And I said it yesterday, it's not my thoughts that really affect me, it's other people's bullshit that they direct towards me, either intentionally or accidentally. I could tell some stories, but I don't feel like going down those areas because it makes me sound whiny and like I'm a victim, feel bad for me. That's not why I do that stuff, but I don't want to do it again because people will say that stuff like, oh, he's whining about this, he's whining about his trauma, wah, wah. So I'll stay away from my own personal reflections. Like, if you want to know about that stuff, just in my book, I wrote in detail about my COVID experiences, losing my mind, some of the crazier moments of my life. Some people would call it a midlife crisis, but I don't think I would have had any of this shit because I never had a mental breakdown ever in my life. Never had anything until COVID happened. So I wouldn't call it a nervous breakdown, a midlife crisis. It was just a lot of shit that happened to me all at once that kind of took my head and just rearranged it in a really messed up fashion. And it took me a while to get past that. Like, in terms of trying to self-analyze stuff that I don't understand, you can only self-torture yourself. If you can't figure it out, you just have to kind of assume whatever you want to assume and then just move on. And I've tried to do that. I'm still trying to do it. But the fact is, I'm still stuck in the muck. I can't get a job. Right now, I can't get a job. I'm not going to work in New Jersey or the East Coast because I've had bad experiences. So I have to move to the West Coast. That's the only place I would want to exist for the next 20 years. And I have applied to other places, Nashville, Tennessee, New Orleans, because they seem pretty cool, Miami. So I don't know if I would deny it. If somebody hired me, I probably would go to those places. But I'm more expecting to go to the West Coast in the Southwest, around that area. But that's when I know that my life can move forward once all this shit is actually behind me. People often would say, you got to move on, man. You can't get hung up on the past. And it's easy to say that shit. It's easy to try to convince yourself of that. But when you can't survive, you can't make a living, well, there is no point. Like, there is no point to, is that nirvana? Am I reaching enlightenment? No, I'm going to starve to death if I can't get a job. So it's people who say that stuff don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what it's like to go through this, to not have an outlet. And I don't blame those people. I blame the system in general. whatever that means. Yeah, I know the system, man. The system, man. I don't fucking know what I even mean myself. But a system where a hardworking, clean person who doesn't do anything to harm other people cannot get a fucking job. That's my reality at the moment. I sound angry about it because I've been trying for like 2 or 3 months now. And I'm not trying to get a fancy job that you need all these fancy degrees. I'm trying to get a job at like a Starbucks, which should have no problem. So it's an issue, man. There's something broken in the general atmosphere of if it's a political thing, if it's some other bullshit. Obviously, I'm not the only person to go through something like this. It's a broken system where people don't have any opportunity to do shit in life. And probably the only way to solve that problem is for everyone to experience that. Everyone has to go through it. 5, 6 years of no income. You can't survive on your own. You go through that shit and then come out on the other side and see if you would want to do that to another person. Because it's shitty. You're either a vindictive person like that and you would do it. Because I feel that in myself sometimes too. The people who wronged me, I would want them to go through what I went through. And then see how they feel after 5, 6 years of living through my experiences. But of course, I don't have control over that. I don't even care enough to really think about that as a deep conversation. It is an eye for an eye type of philosophy that I usually try to stay away from because it's a waste of time. My goals in life have nothing to do with other people's bullshit. Maybe I made some of my art because of that. So thanks to those people, the people who put bullshit in my life. The only thing I would say is thank you for providing me your bullshit so I could make some cool art from it. That's cool. Maybe I'll put thank yous when I make my albums to all those people. But it goes back to, do all those moments justify where I am right now? No, not at the moment. All the shit that people threw at me led me to do this and write some cool stuff. Thoughts at a Funeral, this album I wrote before these experiences, but the lyrics came after. The lyrics I didn't write until 2022 after I lost my job, after I went crazy from COVID, the anxiety, the paranoia that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And I'm to blame for some of it for being addicted to Twitter and other shit, but there's plenty of blame of external forces that fuck me up. So I was able to draw from that, from those moments and write some cool stuff. Maybe the next album I'll go through is Radiation Highway, since that's specifically about my COVID times and all the songs I wrote happened early on during 2020, which I don't even like reading it because it brings back all those feelings of confusion and paranoia. But, it's 5 years removed, so I can go through it and speak honestly about it. I wrote about it in my book, so I already shared it publicly. So I shouldn't have a problem reading it out loud. And there's a lot of unanswered questions because, in my experience, people don't like to admit they're wrong. It's the corporatization of everything. Everyday life has been made into a corporate type of environment of never admit you're wrong about anything and live that type of an experience because people are afraid of lawsuits. People are afraid to ruin their own reputation, but they're fine with trying to malign somebody else. It's a part of the political climate in the United States. And it's the reverse of everything that people will celebrate when people go out on July 4th and have their big parties for the 250th celebration of America. They're not going to be thinking about all that shit. Hopefully not. Just like I said about Nirvana, you get to a point in your head, like, this is my interpretation. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think a person reaches nirvana when they escape from all these bubbles and they just exist. You just exist to exist. But I don't know how do you instill that type of philosophy if you're not a monk and you have to survive in a capitalistic society. You have to compete, you have to survive, you have to feed your children or feed yourself. You have to have a way to separate that from your spirituality somehow, because that goes against everything enlightenment would kind of lean on: to do no harm, to do. I don't think competition is a bad thing. I'm not saying that. But it's hard to live like a monk, to do no harm, to live in this spiritual realm when everything around you is telling you the opposite. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to buy this. It becomes that type of a bipolar type of sensation of, how do I limit the consumerism? How do I live a minimalist life to kind of half-ass it, at least? If I can't reach enlightenment like a monk, like a Buddha, maybe I can at least live a simpler life where I don't indirectly harm other people. It's a very hard thing to comprehend. What was I talking about before that? I forget, I think. Yeah, it's a tough thing to do. And it's probably tough in any society. If you live in a communist country, it's probably just as difficult to maintain any kind of spiritual flow that might lead you to a more peaceful state of mind, away from all the bullshit and headaches. And that's really the realization I've made, that I have plenty of bullshit that I can deal with because it's really not that bad. But the problem I have is other people's bullshit infecting my life. I talked about it yesterday, feeling like something is blocking my path. And that's how I still feel a lot of times, because there has to be a reason I did all this shit. It's not just I did this to do it as a therapy thing. I wrote 15 screenplays, 500 songs. Now it's even more than that. Whatever else I did since 2020 that I should have been doing earlier, but I never really got put in that position to do something like that. So I'm trying to reach that compromise within myself, the happy balance of, how do I go forward with all this stuff I've done? And it starts with getting a job. It starts with moving to the West Coast and seeing where that takes me. So wherever that is, I'd still be doing this, even though nobody really pays attention to this stuff. I would still do a YouTube video every week to kind of go through my progress and shit. And eventually I'd have albums on Bandcamp digitally, the ones that I can do myself, like this one. This would be one of the early ones that I work on, because I don't have to sing anything. Maybe just a couple different melodies that are more screaming than anything. I feel like that's a therapy too. I put that in a lot of my stories, the primal screaming. In Seeds of Anarchy, they're doing a rain dance because there's a drought, and then they primal scream into each other's faces to kind of plead to the gods for rain. Like, there is a meditative force. It doesn't have to be quiet meditation. You could scream and scream from the bottom of your guts, the depths of your asshole, and just let out your primal scream and see how that opens up your airways and different patterns of thought. Like I've never really practiced that, but I've read stuff about that. Similar to chanting that they do in group meditation or by yourself. The Om. There's reasons for these types of phrasing like that. Don't ask me. I read a book once, so that's as far as I can go with that. Music as a healing to the self, or something like that. I spoke about that before. Peter Michael Hamel, I think was his name. I'll stop with this because I don't feel like talking for 3 hours. Peter Michael Hamel book. I think he made ambient music too. Author of Through Music to the Self. Yeah, I wish I still had it, but I don't have the book anymore. Peter Michael Hamel. I don't even know if you can get it on Kindle. I think I got it as a paperback, yeah. Through Music to the Self by Peter Michael Hamel. He goes into that. Because he studied that in maybe Indian traditions and other places, of why certain chants developed in tribal villages or other cultures in terms of meditation and chanting like that. And he relates that to music. It's really interesting. I would recommend it. I would want to read it again if I can find it somewhere. Because I only read it the one time, but it was memorable. But there's a lot of books about that stuff. How to meditate as a daily practice. And I'm sure a lot of people have tried it, like myself, but it never became a staple of my diet. I tried praying the rosary as a form of meditation because that's the only prayer I know. And that's the only thing I could repeat in my head that I know since I was a kid. So I tried to meditate through praying the rosary for a while, but that kind of lost its appeal as well. Maybe I should just try sitting in silence outside, find a tree and just sit in silence and see how long I could do that. In Willie the Vegan, that story, that's what I kind of went for, but in a more radical fashion, where Willie the Vegan leaves. In the beginning of the story, he just meditates in the middle of a highway in traffic. And, it's a fucking fantasy story, science fiction. So he floats up and then people join him in the highway. Everyone meditates together. That's kind of what I was picturing. If I was ever going to make a graphic novel, that would be one of the scenes at least. Some crazy asshole just starts meditating in the middle of I-95. You're like, what the fuck, dude? Get out of the road. But yeah, I'm not going to try that. I might try meditating outside since it's summertime now and see if I can get a good routine going, if I can find a place to go. But again, I'm trying to move, so everything's delayed in my life until I can get a job and move west. Everything is delayed in my life. Any practice that I want to start, I don't even want to start it because it's going to be done in my new location, wherever I end up living. It's going to happen there. So I don't know how to get to that point yet. I've been trying, and I really didn't think it would be a struggle to find a fucking job. I don't understand it. It's just a weird type of it's a conundrum. I don't know what else to say there. It's such a weird process. Like you just apply for a job. I applied to literally like 200 locations throughout the Southwest Texas, Portland, all over the West Coast in terms of Starbucks. And I got 2 video interviews, and now other ones say they don't do video interviews. It's very odd. hopefully I can finally just get a job to get started here, because it is a sense of frustration I'm feeling where I don't want to get on a bus. The woman I spoke to today was like, well, if you ever relocate, then you could come in for an interview. Like, I can't relocate until I get a job. So it's not something I could do. I sounded like Christopher Walken there. Until I get a job, I can't just move without having a place. Well, you can't get a place to live unless you have an income, unless you have a trust fund or something. And if you're a trust fund person, you don't need a place to live. You can do whatever the fuck you want. So it's a weird time right now. I apply to other places too. It's not just Starbucks. But Starbucks is the one that makes the most sense to me, because I feel like I could do that job fairly, you know, not brainless work. You have to put thought into it. And it's not exactly mindless work, but it's not exactly hard labor, and it's not exactly, it's just a fucking job, man. And yeah, it gets me frustrated to think about, because I can't just move in hopes of getting an interview with someone, or hopeful that the interview goes well, or I'm going to be homeless. Like, yeah, that's the problem I have right now. Once I get a job, then I could figure out everything else. But it all starts with getting a job. And it's pretty ridiculous that I've had to wait this long. But I can't do anything else but keep applying and keep applying. Maybe I should go on unemployment, collect unemployment for 6 months, and then be like, hey man, I'm trying to get a job. No one's giving me a fucking job, so what do you want me to do? And just keep getting unemployment, getting unemployment, getting unemployment for the rest of my fucking life. I don't like doing that. I want an actual job so I can make an honest living and do what I want to do like that. It removes all the other bullshit from my life. It gives me stability, security, and I need that. I have a 20-year plan, and the quicker I get to it, the better my odds are of hitting all these things out of the park, the best of my abilities, and all those cliches. So that's what I'm waiting for. I'm talking about this now just because it's in my head. It doesn't really relate to this album. But as an example, if I was in my home studio with the instruments and the ability to record music, that's what I'd be doing right now. Instead of having this talk about, woe is me, I need a fucking job so I can move to California or wherever. I'd actually be making this music right now, which adds to the frustration. Somebody who has a plan like this should be able to create their path. And I know I'm being blocked. It just feels that way. There's no other explanation as to why I can't get a job, whether it's at Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, or Dunkin' Donuts, or anywhere else. Not anywhere else, but in a matter of speaking, for a job like that where you don't need some fancy degree or anything. I did go to college, not to be a barista, but for journalism and political science, and I'm not trying to get a job in those fields. I just want a job to support what I really want to accomplish in life. I don't want to be a journalist or think about politics. That's maybe what my intentions were back then, but even then I didn't know what the fuck to do with that. My path is to make this music, to make these stories, to find other people to work with. That's my path, and I need to survive while I'm doing that. Maybe one day in the future, I won't need that job at Starbucks because I'll be making money off my music. Maybe I sell a screenplay, my book starts to sell, and I change my thinking. But until that happens, yeah, I need to get a job. And I even said it yesterday, even if I was working on this, if I was in my desert abode right now, making loud as fuck music, to create this album musically. And then maybe I'll train myself to make animation in another couple days. But the music is always the most important thing. So that's what I would do first. I can't make anything else without the music. I would still probably want some kind of a job just to be a part of something, some other kind of community thing, or volunteer. I'd still be donating blood every 2 weeks and doing other stuff, so I don't become a complete hermit like I used to be. There's a side of me that wants to go back to that life, just sit, live alone in the desert, off the grid, never have to deal with people's bullshit, the news, or strange people fucking with me. And that's an attractive life, yeah. But I also want to be careful not to fall into the same traps as before, where you become so isolated that it becomes a negative thing in terms of creating art. You need to have some kind of a other person's perspective, or maybe not so much an editor, but some kind of another worldview in your life, so you don't become so self-centered and whatever. But the good thing is, I've realized now, other people who put their bullshit on me are not effective. It's not doing anything. If people want to do it, they do it. I can't stop them. But when other people mess with my life, and I'm not going to give the examples in this talk, but it's not my problem. I used to let it get to me, but then I realized, like, am I doing that to people? No. So first of all, nobody should be doing it to me in the first place. But because it's happening, you just have to learn how to handle it. And I've gotten to that point where I might think about something for an extended period. If somebody does something disrespectful, does something very weird, it's going to be in my headspace for a couple days, because that's just how my brain is. Or I'll try to incorporate it into a story, use it in my art somehow, if I can do that. Or pretend I'm a lawyer and relitigate or litigate the offense. But in terms of freaking out in public, which is probably the reason people do that, is to trigger other people, to get a reaction from them, to embarrass them publicly, to shame them, to make them look bad publicly. That's really the main reason. So if that's happening to you, that's my only advice. Don't give in to people's bullshit, even if they really, really mess with you in nefarious ways. Just let them do it. Let them expose themselves as assholes or cunty people. They probably won't care anyway, but maybe it would spark something within them to not do that anymore. Jim Jeffries had a bit like that. Like, he was talking about maybe the war on terrorism or gun violence. I forget what it was, but he's like, don't be the asshole. I think he was talking to an American audience. Some political issue, like, don't be the asshole. Let the other person, if that's what they want to do in life. And I've had strangers fuck with me, and probably their intent is to have me, like, get triggered and freak out publicly. That's what I'm talking about. I don't see any other motive for a stranger messing with another person. Their only motive is to somehow get that person heated up, so they do something stupid, say something stupid. They could take a video, put it on Facebook. Look at this Karen, another Karen. I do it too, man. In terms of watching the videos, that's my problem. There was a Phillies Karen. The Phillies played a game in Miami. There was a foul ball that a little kid was going to get, or the dad got it and gave it to his kid. But another Phillies fan was a woman, and she was like, that ball was in front of me. I should have it. Or I don't know what it really was, what her gripe was. And there was like an argument over it. They called her the Phillies Karen. So, of course, I had to watch that video. Like, I gave into that. In my better days, I'd just be like, ah, fuck this. I don't want to watch this shit. But it is kind of entertaining. But I would never do that to someone. I'd never trigger someone intentionally. I'm not saying that's what that was either. But it was still a Karen moment, which is now known as a Karen moment in social media circles. But I would never waste my time to mess with another person in any way, mentally, physically, financially, try to harm somebody. Um, I've never been that type of person because I don't like confrontations. You have to learn to deal with people like that because people like that do exist. And it's happened to me a lot over the last 5 years. But that would be my advice. If you're not used to that and it starts popping up in your life, just ignore it the best you can and let those people expose themselves as the idiots they are. Uh, Let them be the asshole and then just walk away and try to forget about it after a couple of days. It usually takes me maybe a day or two to totally forget about stupid people like that. Or I don't even want to say stupid people, but people who do stupid things. So, because not everyone is going to be all stupid. There's still good in some people. People who do stupid things is a better way to say it. It's not a cunt. It's people who do cunty things. A person who does a cunty thing. That's what I've learned from some of the more recent examples of this. That you shouldn't call that person a cunt. Kind of like what Christians say about homosexuals, that you don't hate the homosexual, you hate the sin. You don't hate the cunt, or you don't call that person a cunt. You just don't like their cunty uh, their cunty actions or cunty words. So there's a difference there. It's less offensive. But all right, I think I'm going to stop here since I'm not talking about anything related to this album. But this is kind of what the second half of these talks turn into, where I just get random thoughts out so they don't live in my head anymore. I don't know where I'm going to go next in terms of doing. I still call these table reads. I understand what a table read is, but this is just what my version of a table read is. If I was in a band, or if I was in a room with another band and they wanted to perform these songs and I had to pitch it to someone, that would be like a table read, like they do in a series for a show where they have a table read before they go shoot the episode. That's how I view this, just because I don't know what else to term it. I could call it Thoughts at a Funeral Analyzed, Thoughts at a Funeral Therapy Session. I just go table read because it makes sense in my brain, but I understand what a real table read is. I know I'm not doing that, but I think I got through most of this pretty good. I don't know what I would do next. There's a couple other concept albums that have a story. The Vulture Prince would probably be the one I do if I do one again tomorrow. The Vulture Prince is another morality tale, similar to Songs from the Rhine. It kind of has a Middle Eastern spirit. I read The Prophet by, I don't know how to say his name, Khalil Gibran. I don't know his name. But I read that after watching, speaking of animation, Salma Hayek either had I don't know how to say his name, Khalil Gibran, that's how I'm saying it, Khalil, Lebanese American writer and poet, and I don't know his other stuff. I've only read The Prophet, and it's really good. It's like a Marcus Aurelius Meditations. It kind of has happy thoughts to get you through life. It's a book you probably should read more than once. Khalil Gibran, Lebanese writer, poet, and visual artist, also a philosopher, although he rejected the title, according to Wikipedia. So I would kind of compare it to that. My album, The Vulture Prince, maybe I'll get to it next, since that one has a story, and I view that one as a children's book. I would write it like a children's book with maybe no animation involved, but there could be. But it has a Middle Eastern flavor to it, because I think, not that I've read any Middle Eastern works of folklore or philosophy, maybe this one is kind of the main inspiration there. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Maybe that's the main inspiration for why I wrote it. And yeah, it's a good book. I only read it once, but it's a book you can just flip open and read like poetry. And I think it's pretty popular. A lot of people know it. Back when I was collecting vinyl and books at Goodwill, you would find it a lot. I think even in vinyl format with maybe a folk singer. Khalil Gibran, The Prophet, on vinyl. I want to say that, yeah, there was like a popular, common type of vinyl record you would find at a lot of these places that had nothing but, dollar records. I guess it was pretty popular whatever time it came out. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It looks familiar. Maybe from 1970s they made this. Yeah, Richard Harris. That's the name I couldn't think of. I don't know who Richard Harris is. He's a famous actor. Khalil Gibran featuring Richard Harris, The Prophet, Atlantic record label from 1974. I would find that a lot. I didn't know what it was. I still don't know how it would sound, so maybe I should see if Spotify has it so I can listen to it, since it's in my head right now. Or it's on YouTube as well. Yeah. So it was a popular book. It's very well known. But maybe I'll go through that tomorrow. It's one of my newer ones. Originally, it was called The Last Punjabi Prince, and it was going to be a punk record about some Indian prince. And whatever story I would come up with, a punk record from an Indian perspective, or with Indian instruments, because I do like Indian music. I mentioned that story yesterday, the Koh-i-Noor, the diamond, something, whatever it's called, the world's most infamous diamond. It's a great book with a lot of Game of Thrones type of elements in it. So I wanted to create a story like that, but I never got to it. I like the song still, so I kind of reworked it into The Vulture Prince. After I wrote it, I found out that there was an album with that title already, The Vulture Prince by, I can't think of her name. Very popular artist, The Vulture Prince. I can't think of her name right now. Hold on one second. Yeah, Arooj Aftab. She's based in New York, I think. Vulture Prince was the third album by Pakistani musician Arooj Aftab, released by New Amsterdam Records in 2021. So there already is some art with that title, Vulture Prince, but I didn't even know about it until after I did this. It's really good. I put it on my album, my favorite albums of my life as a songwriter, my favorite 501 Part 1. I did put that on there. Not just because I thought it was a cool coincidence. It really did speak to me. It's very high regards. If you look it up, it got very high ratings by a lot of, even Pitchfork. I'm reading on Wikipedia right now. So it's definitely worth checking out. Maybe I'll talk about it more tomorrow. Barack Obama selected the song Mohabbat from the album as one of his summer playlist favorites for 2021. So it is really good. I think she got some Grammy stuff from it. It was an interesting type of a coincidence that somebody else titled it The Vulture Prince, but it's not the first time that happened. I have a screenplay called The Last Prisoner, and I think there's another movie with that title, but it wasn't really a famous movie. So in my head, I just kept it like that. If it ever became a problem, then I could change it later. But if I do it tomorrow. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I also have an idea for what's it called? The Evolution of a Song, Part 3. I already did 2 of those. The next one would be Moonlight Graham is my favorite human being. Moonlight Graham is my favorite human being. It's kind of like a post-punk song influenced by Idols and bands like that I got into later on. I love Idols. I think they're really high energy, high octane post-punk music, if you want to call it that. I think there's a big movement in Scotland, if that's where they're from, of like these post-punk community of these musicians that do stuff like that. I'm not sure if Idols is Scottish. I'm not sure. I want to say yes. Idols band Wikipedia. I'm going to Wikipedia. Idols are just a British post-punk band, so I'm not sure where they're from. Yeah, I'm not sure. Devonshire. So maybe it's just England, not Scotland. But regardless, it doesn't matter. I just always feel a connection to Scottish bands, but yeah, they're amazing. They're really good. Joy as an Act of Resistance. That was the one that led me to really like them. But there are a lot of good bands that come from that area. Just the UK in general. And maybe I'll go that route. It depends on my mood tomorrow. Do I want to talk about post-punk stuff? Or do I want to talk about Arooj Aftab and Khalil Gibran and read my story of The Vulture Prince? So I'll make that game time decision tomorrow. But yeah, that's all for today. I think this is a different kind of experience from the other 2 I did so far because it's not a narrative with characters. It's just 10 different animations, but it is a concept album, and it could have that animated accompaniment that really sets it apart as a unique art project. If I have to work with other people, that would be just as cool. I'm not against that. I'm just a bit on the shy side that I've never worked with other people, so I don't know what that means. How do you even collaborate with other people? I'll just be like, to me, that's how I would do it. If I can find an animation company or just an animator who knows how to do short little 5-minute animations, you have total freedom. I guess I would just ask for an example of something they did, and if it connects with me, then like an interview, I guess. But I would want someone who actually likes the music too. So maybe that's how it works. I make the album, and if somebody happens to enjoy my music and feels the groove I'm going for and knows how to make animation that would fit it, because it has to fit the mood of the music a little bit, then that would be a amicable relationship where everyone has artistic freedom to do what they want. Because I know I could try to do animation, and maybe it's easier today with different Adobe products or a different company that you can teach yourself music production, you can teach yourself animation with the tools at your hands today that are kind of available to everyone. I don't know if I could do this at a public library, but I would have to get my own setup, I guess, to really do it nonstop. But if anything, I think that's a cool experiment to see how far I could go in achieving what I want to achieve. Writing something is different than actually producing it. I'll go back to The Marvelous Miss Maisel, and I'll end on this note. Towards the end of that series, Midge, Miss Maisel, she's giving some television appearance, maybe to Telethon, maybe it was that episode, and she's talking about the difference between writing and performing. And it was a weird moment. It felt like she was criticizing or saying how writers are important, but performance is a different animal. You can write the best material, but if you're not George Carlin and you don't know how to perform it with the timing and the correct meter and his hand motions and his facial expressions, George Carlin was a genius linguist. His vocabulary, his way of memorizing these things, speaking for an hour without any type of a script, remembering all this stuff in his head, and then doing it again in a year. Like, I'm not a comedian, of course. Maybe a couple people laughed at some of my stories, hopefully. I'm not a comedian. I tried to do a stand-up before. It was terrible. On my Substack, I tried to do like a 5-minute stand-up routine. I had no idea what I was doing. I have no timing or metaphors that really can pack a punch like that. But that's why George Carlin, he's not just a writer. He's not just a genius in terms of the English language and how to, what's the orator or a debater? Like, I would not want to debate George Carlin because I feel like he would have this persuasiveness that would just make me look stupid. George Carlin had that. Dave Chappelle has that. I wouldn't want to debate Dave Chappelle on anything. I feel like he's got that inside of him as well. Maybe Bill Burr. Yeah. Bill Burr, I feel like if he can't outwit someone, he's just gonna tear you a new one and make you feel stupid. Or Sarah Silverman. It's a different kind of art form. Why am I talking about this? Because of the Marvelous Miss Maisel. Like, you can write all this great stuff and whatever. I think my stuff is good. Of course, I'm going to say that. I think my stuff is really good. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I feel like it could get developed into something that people would enjoy as an escape with no politics. You just escape to whatever world I'm trying to create, and there's no one's going to watch this and be like, who represents this guy? What tribe is this guy? Is he going to be aligned with my values? Just watch the fucking show, man. Do you really care? I don't care when I watch something. Like, I guess after a while, if you're a known entity like Stephen King, people know what to expect, I guess. So he's just an individual tribe, the tribe of Stephen King. But as a writer, yeah, it's different when you actually have to perform something. I would be afraid to even do a poetry reading. I thought about doing something like that in Princeton, New Jersey. There's some free events like that where you can just get on stage and, I don't know, I'm guessing you can do whatever you want as an open mic type of thing. Strum a guitar and do spoken word, or just have some ambient music in the background and read some poetry shit. I thought about doing that maybe a couple months ago, but it's something that would be put on hold until a later date because I don't really care about that stuff. It's cool. Maybe it gives me a little bit more confidence. Maybe I can get involved with a different community of people and meet people who are animators and could give me better advice about shit. So there's other reasons to do it besides just becoming more comfortable as a performer. I'm comfortable as a writer. I'm comfortable being alone, playing my guitar, and trying to experiment with different techniques and learning something new. I'm comfortable with all those things because I've done it for 20 years, but I've never been a performer. So, can somebody develop that in their 40s? I guess, yeah, why not? It's only an age, but it's probably something that takes a while to get comfortable with that. And just from memorizing stuff, memorizing lyrics, at Springsteen, you have like 1,000 songs to draw on. I guess he just becomes a part of your muscle memory. Every song, like as a performer, you have to memorize it all. It just sounds like a crazy amount of work. Or, of course, Bob Dylan stuff, yeah. Or, like I said about George Carlin, how could you remember? I've watched a lot of George Carlin specials because he's probably my favorite. And I don't know how he does it, how anyone could do it like that, the way he does it, that it's such a complicated use of the English language, even when he's talking about the English language or soft language. One of his biggest things was the use of language, how that itself is a form of propaganda. It's not just the messaging, the actual titles and the terminology is a part of the propaganda. But I've talked about this before, so I'm going to end it here. Can I get to that point? Yeah, I can. But my main motivation to do this for the next 20 years is not to make myself like a superstar performer selling out stadiums. I'm not going to be that person, so it's not in my cards to even try to be that person. Not many people can. But I just want to be able to survive and make what I already did. I feel like it's an unfinished product. I have 70 concept albums that are unfinished. They're just sitting there waiting to be made into music, and it's a bad feeling to have that burden because it feels like that. I can't get that off my back until I actually start doing this. So that's where I'm at. I don't think I could put it in a better way than that. It is like a burden because I don't consider myself anything. I just want to make cool shit with myself, with other people, any possible way. Excuse me. Any way really that promotes just the message of that. Just no bullshit, just make cool shit. And hopefully I can do that someday soon.